Hello again, everyone. Tom Nagorski in the Cipher Brief virtual studio with the latest of our conversations about all the huge changes that have happened in a very short time, just a little more than a week now, involving the US and Russia, the US and Europe, the implications for Ukraine and elsewhere. And today, a conversation about how all of this is being received in Russia. And I should say, when I say this, we are referring to the Trump administration's new dialogue with Vladimir Putin and the president, the negotiations in Saudi Arabia, which it seems are about much more than just the war in Ukraine, and which do not include the Europeans, and now scathing criticism that the president has leveled at the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky. I'm probably leaving some things out, but that's the gist of it. We're delighted to be joined today by Vasily Gatov, who is in Boston today. He's a fellow with the Center on Communication, Leadership, and Policy at USC, a longtime researcher and observer of Russian media. And Vasily, thank you, first of all, for being with us. And I wondered if I could begin with a more personal rather than analytical question and just ask you, you're a Russian native who's been in this country for a long time. How have you received this, really kind of game-changing events of the last 8, 9 days?
Thank you for having me. Um, it's a pretty difficult question to answer because on a personal level, I definitely am very disappointed and not to say disgusted with what had been happening in America in the last days in regard to war in Ukraine and kind of unexpected flop in attitude towards Moscow and Putin in particular.
Hmm. Now, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, on the other hand, I mean, like as a person who is analyst first and foremost, of course, it's a very interesting thing to look at. Uh, Also because it's pretty much unexpected in this form. I mean, we expected some changes. I mean, we probably uh, would would have liked to see some changes in American policy towards Ukraine and Russia, but not to that extent.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of I follow that with disgust on personal level and great interest on professional level.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. Now, as you know more than most people, we're at the 3 year anniversary now of the full scale invasion of Ukraine, and for all that time, the Kremlin's propaganda organs have been trying on a regular basis. I think it's fair to say to kind of make the best of what's going on. Some of them, until pretty recently, I believe, and I'm not sure most Americans know this, but some of those people with big platforms were saying things like, we have to attack NATO, we have to attack America, we have to all this kind of stuff. And I gather now that they perhaps have changed more than anyone in terms of what they're saying in the last few days. Is that true? And can you give us some examples?
There are people who still maintain heavily anti-American, anti-Western platform,
Hmm.
uh, but those who depend on Kremlin economically or who follow the line very kind of attentively, they immediately flipped. They kind of uh, and they started to erase what they were writing or saying or commenting with all these threats to use nuclear weapons against Europe or America. They refocusing their anger from United States to Europe,
Hmm.
particularly onto Britain and France, and um, the thing that the positive attitude towards America and Donald Trump in last 4 or 5 days spiked up.
Yeah.
We haven't seen that for many months. It was generally slightly negative if we summarize kind of the attitude, but the first spike was around inauguration days, and now the spike is like twice as high up in positivity. If we separate only this far right pro-war segment, I think it's even more, because they were generally much more negative towards America before, and now they are discussing how Russia will split the world in halves and with America rule it. I am not joking.
Wow. Wow. Any other examples like that? That's quite interesting.
One of the most notorious propagandists in Russia, Alexander Prokhanov. He's kind of a writer and editor of the newspaper called Tomorrow. I think it was like just around Trump's inauguration, he wrote a huge apocalyptic piece, how America is drowning, and we will use all our might, Russia, to defeat it, and Ukraine and Europe, and Russia will be victorious. Although this has a smell of the nuclear ash, we will be victorious. Just yesterday, he completely changed his tone. Donald Trump is a great strategist. We'll look in a bright future where Russia, America, and China would create a stable world of multipolarism, and we all will prosper. Again, I mean, this is like 10 days or 15 days in between.
Wow.
And he's not the only one. He's not the only one.
Recognizing excellence in national security, the Cipher Brief Honors Dinner celebrates those who've made a real difference in protecting our nation. It's an unforgettable evening with top leaders in the field. Join us in honoring these remarkable contributions. Reserve your seat now at cipherbriefhonors.com.
And to the extent you can know this, and maybe it's impossible, Vasily, last question is how this filters into society. I mean, I know you probably have, for your scholarly and your work with filter labs, as good an eye and ear to this as one can have from across the other side of the world. But do you think these developments will change the attitudes of Russians who have felt however they have felt for the last 3 years?
Yes, it definitely affects Russians in exile, and very negatively. It's not only because Trump's policies affect their survival and well-being. Many of them depended on USAID grants. Let's just speak about them openly. But many people thought that America would not give up allies, and one of the hopes were that America will stand with Europe, with Ukraine, to the moment when Russia somehow decides to change the course. Now it's a great disappointment, is grim, black, not even gray, black attitude. Inside Russia, the situation is different. Many people expect that the change would enlighten their life. I don't know how to say it better. I mean, that the things that they are suffering so much without, like foreign cars, McDonald's, Starbucks, and Italian fashion, will come back to Moscow as soon as possible. And I would say this is probably majority of people living in kind of major cities in Russia. The people kind of who feed the war with their bodies, unfortunately, people
Yeah.
living in small towns and rural areas, I think their opinion matters least in this situation. I think they would probably be split. Some of them would prefer war to end. Some of them would not. I mean, because the wealth that war brought to some underdeveloped and poor areas sometimes is tremendous. I mean, one of my sources recently traveled by Transsib and said the level of economic activity beyond Irkutsk, I mean, along the Chinese border, he never saw that. I mean, everywhere you see construction sites, you see cranes, you see hundreds of uh, Home Depots. I mean,
This is along the Russian-Chinese border. Yeah.
yes, and the reason is very simple. I mean, all the traffic, the trucks, and truck drivers, and repair stations, hotels. They moved from the western border to the eastern border,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a tremendous amount of prostitutes and drug trade, everything.
Mm.
And regions like Irkutsk, Chita, and Buryatia, and so on, they so greatly benefit from that
Mm.
that they and I don't think they want to lose it.
Mm-hmm.
So that there'll probably be a serious split of opinion. And the last thing that I want to say about the complexity of Russian reactions on war in general, on casualties, on support to Kremlin, I would expect more problems for Russia than less if the war abruptly stops.
Mm-hmm.
And not only because of crime reasons, what I cited earlier, not only because of major shift in economics that not it possibly not very favorable for Russians. And the last is that the public opinion would from almost unitarian today would split into normal kind of peacock differences, and then you just don't know what will happen. I mean, it could lead to changes in general policy. It could lead to more rigid regime. It could lead to necessity to kind of look into opinions of people who are not very much pro-Kremlin.
Yeah.
Everything could happen, but again, it is interesting. But so far, the cost of that, especially for Ukraine, looks tremendously big and bad.
Yeah. We'll have to leave it there. Vasily Gatov, it's great to talk to you. I appreciate your time and your insights. And as you say, it's depressing, but it's also interesting. And we thank you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Tom.